Welcome back to YouTube. These are all my tips for hair loss. No, I mean, I have a lot of tips. I just feel a little guilty for having this good of hair talking about this. Honestly, I'm living on borrowed time, you guys. Everyone in my family has alopecia. So, okay, here's the tips though. Identify what kind of hair loss you're having. If you suspect that you're having like an increase in hair sheddage and you're noticing like, hair not in places that it used to be there, if you have insurance, if you can get access to a dermatologist, do that. The average human head loses between 80 to 120 hairs per day per wash. So if you're not washing your hair every day, which you shouldn't be, that accumulation of hairs is like, because you didn't do this and you didn't stimulate it so they didn't fall out, it's gonna accumulate to the next day. So if you wash your hair like twice a week, if it was every 3 days, that'd be like 80 times 3, which is 240 to 300. So it's 240 to 300 hairs. If your hair is really long, you look down, that looks really scary, it looks really freaky, but actually like that's normal shedding. Figuring out what that is important. So like, is this just normal shedding or is this like an increase? There are several different types of hair loss and it's important to know which one you have. One of the most common types is telogen effluvium. That's like where you might have a high fever. This is reported a lot with like COVID hair loss. A lot of times this happens to people after they go through a cancer treatment and their hair comes back, but it comes back a lot finer. A lot of people who suffer from telogen effluvium, their hair will come back. It will like recover. Sometimes it doesn't recover. Then there's like alopecia, right? Hair loss, but there's like a lot of different kinds of alopecia. There's alopecia totalis, which is like total loss of your hair. Like you lose your lashes, your brows, body hair, like you don't have hair anymore. Typically, if you have alopecia totalis, your hair isn't coming back from that. Then there's alopecia areata. Areata is area in Latin, and you can think of it easily as like area plus ata, so like areata, alopecia areata. That's like bald spots. So a lot of times that's associated with stress. It can be like lifestyle stuff. It means something's going on like in your body hormonally or like stress-wise, and it's your hair and your scalp is showing the effects. So that can usually be like, circles of missing hair, patches of missing hair. It can even affect eyebrows, body hair. I once used to hook up with this hot, like hairy daddy, and he had alopecia areata and he was already bald on his head, but he had really like furry body hair and he was missing like half dollar size circles of body hair. And he had gone to the doctor and they were like, that's alopecia areata. And I just thought that was really interesting that he had alopecia areata on his body hair, right? Then there's like hereditary hair loss. And a lot of times you'll hear people say that's like, male pattern balding or whatever, but actually like that can affect women too. With hereditary hair loss, which like all my grandpas, like my family, like all lost their hair. So I like to, affectionately say that I'm living on borrowed time. So I've been taking Propecia since I was like 19 because like my family has like, it seems like, I probably will suffer from hair loss at some point. With hereditary hair loss, the sooner you can address it, the better outcome you have of like staving off the hair loss for the longest. So I think one thing that I want to say as we talk about hair loss is that even if you are experiencing hair loss, you are beautiful, and like not in like a you're beautiful on the inside and out. You're hot, you're fuckable. You either like rock no hair look or you rock a wig if that's what you want to do. Either way, both looks are fuckable. People are going to be into you. Our worth is not dependent on our hair in a really real way. And so just as long as we go into this knowing that like we're hot and we're fuckable, and if you're asexual and you don't want to get fucked, then you're still worthy of love, even if you're losing your hair. So once I noticed that my hairline was moving, I got an appointment with my dermatologist. I was like, my hairline's moving back. He prescribed me Propecia. Most people have a good experience with Propecia. Some people can have negative side effects. There can be like sexual side effects. There can be feeling side effects. And it really has kept my hairline pretty strong. And I'm feeling like I'm keeping my hair pretty well. So for me, that's worked really well. That is a prescription strength thing. It's like a doctor thing. With Roman and Hims, you can get on a finasteride or a Propecia with a doctor like online. So you could do Zoom. You do need to make sure that you get like some workups done and make sure that it's not affecting you in certain ways that you can talk to your doctor about. So that is like it's a conversation. I've personally been on Propecia for a long ass time and it's working and I feel great. And, you know, so yay for that. Other like serums, like the ones like by Nioxin or Hims, that actually has that like medical ingredient that, because part of hair loss, if it's like the hereditary kind, can be from hormones and it can be from like a specific type of testosterone. Those like topical medicine formulas have something that prevents that testosterone from expressing itself like in the skin. So it helps to stave off like hair falling out or like that type of thinning hair. So there's that like more medical version. Then there's more topical formulas that have like decongestants and exfoliants in them, which can help prevent hair loss, but not in the same way that those like, you know, hormone, like medical formulas do. The other piece is like, if you have telogen effluvium or if you're like losing your hair, then it's kind of about like maintaining the hair that you have and you want to keep it as strong as possible. So that looks like using like clarifying treatments on your scalp, making sure that you're not having any blockage in your scalp. So like using a JVN like pre-wash scalp oil. But there's multiple ways that you can think about like scalp oils and scalp serums. First of all, one of their objectives is to keep the hair that you have as strong as possible and to keep your scalp as healthy as possible and to also prevent buildup in your hair follicles that could create so much buildup in your follicle that the hair can no longer penetrate out of that buildup. Because as your hair gets finer, if you get buildup in your scalp, sometimes that hair isn't strong enough to like bust through that buildup. But it is true of like scalp topical things. You need to use them for at least like 3 months before you see any difference, but more like 6 months for like a full result when it comes to like decongesting the hair follicles or seeing new hair grow. So, and it's also true that like the sooner you get on it, the better. Like once it's gone, it's a lot harder to get back. Especially with traction alopecia, any sort of like tight hairstyles, not good for hair loss of any kind. When your hair's wet, it's more vulnerable to breakage and it's a little bit weaker. The bonds are a little bit stronger when they're dry. So when your hair is wet, if you're slicking it back with gel and like putting all sorts of tension on your hair, braiding it when it's wet, like slick, tight ponies, when you're stretching it when it's wet and then it dries, it just starts to break. Like it just boink, just breakage. So traction alopecia, you can grow your hair back from that, but also sometimes you can create like really like permanent hair loss from traction alopecia. I've seen clients who literally like never got their hairlines back because they pulled their hair so tight. Or people that like slept in extensions that were like not installed properly, like create bald spots in their hair from just misuse, overuse of extensions, tight ponytails. So just anything that's too much tension, like if you have a headache from it, that's a good indicator that it's too tight. Heat protectant. It's a huge issue if you're experiencing like thinning hair, falling out hair. You're like, why does heat protectant matter? Because if you're losing your hair and it's getting finer, you want to protect the hair that you do have. So if you are heat styling your hair, you don't want it to, your hair is weaker when it's wet. It's more vulnerable to breakage. The breakage can happen really close to your scalp. It can happen more on the ends, but no matter where it is, you want to protect your hair from that breakage and from that like manipulation of heat styling, especially if your hair is getting finer or thinner. So heat protectant, super important. You have to be mindful of like not wearing too much wigs and not wearing too much toppers. If you're putting, you know, a wig on your already finer hair and it's like rubbing, even if you're using a wig cap, a wig cap, it still is just a lot of like friction and extra heat, and your scalp ultimately needs to breathe. If you have a lot of like hotness and like humidity and like moisture getting trapped under that wig, you can just sweat a little bit more. That can create more sebum. It can kind of plug up. It can just create more buildup of like dry skin, dead skin. So that doesn't mean you can't wear wigs. It doesn't mean you can't wear toppers. It just means that like when you get home from going out with one, take that shit off, let your scalp breathe. But then there's another side to that coin, as there always is, which is like, if you have telogen effluvium to the point where like your hair is never coming back, you've had it for like 3, 5, 10 years and it never regrew. If you have alopecia areata or hereditary hair loss in a way where you've tried the Propecia, maybe you've done hair transplants, maybe you don't want to do any of that stuff and you're just like, bitch, I want to cover it. I want Dolly Parton hair. My hair's never going to be that thickness. If that's your truth, then wig it up. Get wiggy with it from sun up to sundown because it doesn't matter. But then at nighttime, I would say like a pre-wash scalp oil is going to be good. Maybe an exfoliating shampoo when you do take your wig off to like just kind of clarify any excess dead skin or like irritated scalp because you are wearing a lot of wigs. If you want to try to get your hair back, you're gonna wanna try to avoid tons of wig use, tons of topper use. If you're like, that hair's never coming back, I've tried everything, it's been years and I'm sick of like being mad at my hair or whatever, not liking what I see, then just embrace wigs. And that's great. Also, like, I'm not a dietitian or a nutritionist, but hair loss can be the result of nutritional issues. Sometimes if you're not getting enough protein, if you're not getting enough healthy fats, I know like lentils are really good for hair. I know that like avocados, like eggs, I don't know if you're like vegan or vegetarian out there, but like, you know, there are like meatless and like alternative substitutes for those good fats. Your hair and your nails will usually be like the first thing that your body's like, I don't got time for you. Like I need to, you know, I don't got time. So that can be reflective of diet. So that is an important thing that you might want to talk to your doctor or dermatologist about if you're experiencing hair loss. And stress. Because stress is a huge thing with hair loss too. Experiencing hair loss for whatever biological reason, but then you get stressed about it, that can accelerate the hair loss. It can also, extreme stress events can bring on telogen effluvium in the first place. So making sure that you have some sort of like mindfulness practice, like whether that's like, you know, breathing, like, you know, closing your eyes, turning in a timer on for 3 minutes and like practicing some sort of breath work for a few minutes a day, or just like maybe turning your phone off and like just being really mindful of like how your body feels. Because even if you are experiencing hair loss, it's still good for us to be in like a gratitude practice and for us to be grateful of all the things that we do have. But something that like brings you joy, that brings you real childlike joy to look forward to if you are experiencing hair loss or having high stress in your life is another like really good thing to do. Chemicals, period, like hair color, bleach, perms, relaxers, all of it. If you're experiencing hair loss, if you have telogen effluvium, if you have like any type of hair loss, some of the chemical like they're all gonna have like varying effects and you're gonna wanna really talk to your hairdresser before you make any sudden decisions. Highlights can sometimes highlight what's going on. Typically, if your hair is kind of fine or you're losing your hair, going darker sometimes can be a little bit better, can make it look a little bit more full. If you go lighter, it can kind of like make it appear a little bit finer. There are also cases where doing a few highlights or doing a little bit of lightening service can actually like rough up the cuticle and make it appear a little fuller. It really depends on like where you're starting from. But if you are experiencing hair loss, your hair might be a little bit more fragile and prone to breakage from chemical services. So again, you like really need to talk to your hairdresser and get a really clear idea of like where your hair is and what it can stand up against.